Ever launched a Power App that worked perfectly until you tried to update it across environments? If you've ever crossed your fingers while hitting that publish button, you're not alone. In this video, we'll unravel why skipping DevOps in your Power Platform projects isn't just risky. It can quietly drain time, budget, and trust from your entire business. Stick around to see why packaging Power Apps with proper ALM practices could be the single biggest upgrade to your workflow you didn't know you needed. If you've ever seen a Power App that ran smoothly in testing but mysteriously tripped over itself the second it hit production, you know how fast things can fall apart. It's easy to trust the big purple publish button. After all, it looks so official. Click it, move on, and assume everything made its way safely from your sandbox right into someone's workflow. But as plenty of teams have learned, publish isn't a safety net. It's often a tightrope walk, no harness and plenty of wind. Picture this. 1 minute, your finance team's custom app is tracking expenses with no complaints. People are even starting to say, hey, this is way better than that old spreadsheet. Then Friday afternoon rolls around. A last-minute tweak, maybe a formula update or a new field gets pushed out. Nobody expects anything to crash. Still, by Monday morning, nothing's posting the way it should. Managers can't approve expenses. People are sending screenshots, emails are flying, and the phone is lighting up. That one rushed update pushed through with Publish has snowballed into a production outage. Now, instead of a quick fix, you're stuck tracing what broke, often without any breadcrumbs. This is what happens when everything rides on manual deployments. You test, you change, you hope for the best. Maybe you open 2 browser tabs, one for dev, one for prod, flip back and forth, and check that settings look the same. But the reality of manual deployment is that it often brings a false sense of control. If you've ever told yourself, it worked in my environment, it'll be fine in theirs, you've felt that optimism. The problem is it's seldom earned. I've watched a supply chain team lose an entire morning to a Power App glitch triggered by a manual deployment. Their workflow fine in test hit a connector bug as soon as real-world data flowed in. No warning, no error message, just processes silently breaking in the background. Its first instinct was to try undo. In Power Platform, though, that's rarely an option. There's no magic rollback button for a bad Power App publish. At best, you might have a prior export somewhere, or at worst, nothing but screenshotted settings and memory. You patch and scramble, hoping the fix doesn't spark new fires. Some users stop trusting the tool. Others start keeping their own shadow logs just in case. Lost confidence isn't easily restored. It's tempting to see Application Lifecycle Management, ALM, as a luxury reserved for huge organizations with armies of DevOps engineers. But here's where Power Platform throws a curveball. Even the simplest Power Apps, those 2-person HR forms or team schedulers, can become mission critical overnight. Once other departments stack business rules and connectors on top, stability goes from nice to have to non-negotiable. ALM isn't extra weight, it's the structural steel that keeps your app standing when the first big storm rolls through. And the numbers back this up. Microsoft's own reliability team notes that most downtime in business apps isn't triggered by bugs in the code. It comes from process errors during deployment, manual steps missed, configuration mismatches, or incomplete solutions accidentally overwriting working components. One ISV reported that manual Power App changes introduced nearly triple the error rate compared to automated deployments. And those extra errors, they multiply when teams try to push fixes directly to prod, especially under time pressure. What doesn't show up in a dashboard is the real price paid for these misfires. Hours sunk into incident calls, investigation, and rework. Trust shrinks every time a user needs to double-check the app's results. People build workarounds or reintroduce those infamous track it in Excel side channels. Eventually, shadow IT grows up right next to the official solution, and technical debt climbs in the background, quietly but relentlessly. Drilling down, you'll find that technical debt isn't some abstract bogeyman. It's the sum of shortcuts, forgotten hotfixes, and undocumented changes that pile up each time a manual deployment doesn't go smoothly. That debt slows everything down. Onboarding, change requests, even troubleshooting glitches nobody remembers introducing. Meanwhile, updates become riskier, and the urge to never touch what works turns small Power Apps into fragile frozen relics. Most Power Platform outages can't be blamed on faulty code or some unlucky day. Instead, it's the repeated gamble of manual, untracked publishing, patching, and hoping things hold together. Teams let bad habits linger because for a while it seems like the app is keeping pace. The real risk becomes clear only in a crisis, when the publish you trusted leaves you with no way back and a lot of explaining to do. So If we know manual deployment leaves too much to chance, what does a deployment process actually look like when you want your Power Apps to stand up to real-world stress without crossing your fingers every time you hit publish? Solution files versus real ALM, why your Power App isn't as safe as you think. Ever exported a Power Platform solution file, patted yourself on the back and thought, now we're safe, only to discover that your safety net is a lot more like a fishing net. That's one of those illusions nearly every team faces sooner or later. The solution file workflow feels simple. Test in dev, export the solution, import it somewhere new, and get back to building features. On paper, it's the classic case of good enough ALM for Power Apps. And as long as the stars align and no one on the team made parallel changes, the process kind of works. Until it doesn't. Here's the catch. Relying on basic solution exports and imports leaves you with blind spots everywhere. You don't get reliable versioning, so if someone asks what changed between releases, your answer is a best guess, or worse, radio silence. Try merging two slightly different versions manually and it becomes an afternoon of sorting through exported files line by line, hoping you don't lose work or accidentally overwrite someone else's connector. That's assuming you even know which files changed. Most teams end up swapping updated zips through Teams, email, or that one shared folder that's labeled final really. Even a small misstep, a connector with the same name, a missing environment variable, a dependency that shifts behind the scenes can set off a chain reaction you won't see coming until you hit import and suddenly something vital stops working. I've watched a team learn this lesson the hard way. They built a sales dashboard in Power Apps, mapped out a solution containing everything, the app flows and connectors. Seemed solid. But when they went to update their production environment, the import quietly replaced the existing custom connector with a slightly older version. There wasn't a warning, just a silent swap. By Monday morning, several automations failed. Leads sat stuck in approval instead of moving along the process. The fix involved hours of troubleshooting before anyone realized a routine import had quietly overwritten a component that was updated elsewhere. Behind every import like that, there's a story. Broken automations, overwritten connectors, hours lost, piecing things back together and retracing what went wrong. The root problem comes down to the difference between moving files around and having true application lifecycle management. With just solution files, you're managing snapshots, not real history. There's no audit trail, so it's almost impossible to trace which changes broke something in production. If two developers make tweaks at once, merging gets messy fast. Suddenly, you're not debugging Power Apps, you're debugging exports, sitting in meetings trying to remember who changed what last Thursday. Full ALM looks different. Here, every piece of the solution, code, connections, flows, lives in proper source control. Each version gets tracked so you know exactly when something changed and why. Automated build pipelines run tests on changes as they're checked in, catching bugs before anyone can hit publish. The old import, export, and hope workflow becomes a repeatable, reliable process that doesn't require you to remember every tiny detail or trust in luck. Real ALM tools let you rewind changes. So a bad update is just a rollback away, not a hunt for lost zips. Think of it like this. Tossing your most important files in a shared folder and calling it backup doesn't protect you when things go sideways. A proper backup tracks changes, stores history, and lets you restore exactly what you need when you need it. That same logic applies to Power Apps. Solution files alone give you a false sense of safety until a single mistake throws the whole app off balance. There's plenty of research backing this up. Industry studies regularly point out that skipping version control and automation quickly multiplies the rate of deployment failures. According to Microsoft's Power Platform ALM guidance, environments without source control see almost double the rate of rework and post-release firefighting. These aren't just numbers. They line up directly with what teams experience on the ground. Endless email chains, confusion over which version is live, and mounting technical debt that makes each change riskier than the last. Versioning isn't about being overly cautious. It lets you move forward confidently, knowing you can always review what changed, when, and why. As Power Apps grow from simple forms to business-critical platforms, the costs of guess and check multiply. One change, if untracked, can impact 10 other pieces without warning. But with source control and automated packaging, it's clear what moved, who moved it, and how to undo a bad step without scrambling on a Monday morning. And here's the real point. If you can't see what changed, you can't manage risk. You can't fix what breaks, at least not without spending hours retracing steps and second-guessing your last deployment. Relying on solution file exports alone is like running without a seatbelt. Fine until it isn't, and by then you're already dealing with the fallout. So how do teams move past patchwork exports and start managing their Power Platform changes with real intention? What does a system built for safe, rapid change actually look like for Power Apps at scale? Building for change, the real blueprint of sustainable Power Platform DevOps. Imagine if every time you tweaked your Power App, adjusting a formula, updating a screen, rolling out a new feature, it could evolve safely without the anxious weight of what did we just break? That's the goal most teams want, but few actually reach, especially as Power Apps grow from those quick departmental helpers into full-blown business-critical platforms. Most Power Apps start out simple. Someone from HR builds a quick form for tracking training, or a sales manager cobbles together a dashboard in a weekend. Suddenly, people outside the original team start relying on it. New requirements pile on. Requests come in for approval workflows, integration with Outlook, or maybe an automated report for leadership. The more this happens, the more fragile the app becomes. Not because it wasn't built well at first, but because the foundation can't keep up with everything now leaning on it. And here's the real pinch. Every new feature gets pushed fast because the business expects velocity. Users say, can we just have this by next week? So you race to add buttons and tweak flows. Testing never seems to keep up. Release notes, if they exist, turn into afterthoughts. The system works until the day it doesn't, and you're left trying to figure out which last-minute feature caused the latest outage. It's easy to treat Power Apps as a finished product, like a static spreadsheet or a PDF. But in reality, these apps are living systems. They're constantly moving, updated, extended, repurposed. Treating them as one-offs is what gets teams in trouble. Each change might seem tiny at the time, but over weeks and months, those quick fixes stack up. Eventually, just touching the app feels risky. The mature way to handle this is to see Power Apps for what they are: evolving digital assets. If you look at the way successful teams manage their Power Platform projects, there's a visible pattern. First, everything lands in source control, not just the code part of an app, but components, connectors, flows, and environment variables. Instead of handing around zip files and hoping nobody overwrites the wrong version, every change gets recorded. If something goes sideways, it's obvious what changed and who did it. Next up, build pipelines come into play. Each time someone checks in a change, that trigger isn't just about moving files. Automated pipelines validate connections, check dependencies, and can even run automated tests to make sure that an innocent-looking tweak doesn't break a downstream workflow. If a change fails at this stage, the team knows right away, well before it hits production and surprises 100 users. Automated testing is another layer too few teams use, but it's a major difference maker. Automated tests in a Power Platform context can look like mock user flows, verifying that a button really triggers the right process all the way through approvals, or checking that updated connectors pull the data they should. This isn't the old just make sure the screen opens type of testing. It's about making sure business logic still stands up, even as the app grows legs and walks into new departments. I saw a finance company handle this with a budgeting app that started in one division and gradually rolled out across 6 departments. Instead of chaos, their adoption was boring, in the best way. Software deployments scheduled in advance, each environment progressing from dev to test to production. Teams filed requests, got features on the roadmap, and saw updates every 2 weeks. When a critical integration pattern changed, the automated tests failed in the pipeline, not live. The team reverted, fixed the bug, and only then pushed the update. Users barely noticed. The project never got a late-night call or a panicked undo the deployment scramble. Release management is the last big piece. Successful teams treat every push to production like it matters, because it always does. They use managed solutions, avoid direct edits in production, and lean on approvals and playbooks that are agreed to in advance. Instead of rushing fixes, deployments are scheduled and coordinated so one risky change doesn't snowball across environments. Environment strategy is a non-negotiable. Microsoft's own Power Platform documentation calls the dev test prod model essential for separating development from live business data and users. Each environment protects the one above it, so an experiment in dev never becomes a fire in prod. This is the backbone of every sound ALM practice, one that makes every update less a leap and more a careful step forward. The payoff: teams with these building blocks move faster, not slower. New features ship regularly, and updates don't spark anxiety. People trust the process, and the business can say yes to more requests without worrying about the whole stack tumbling down. But as with any strong system, the devil's in the details. Setting this up isn't magic. Mistakes still happen, but they're contained early and fixed quickly. It all raises a practical question. If this blueprint is so effective, why do so many teams struggle to get it right? There are 5 traps most Power Platform teams walk into, sometimes without even noticing. Let's break down what they are, and more importantly, how to spot them before they cost you hours, data, and peace of mind. The 5 arm traps. How to break the cycle before it breaks you. If Alum is so important, why do even the best Power Platform teams keep bumping into the same problems? Most teams don't set out to ignore best practices. It just happens, usually one shortcut at a time, often under the pressure of a looming deadline or an impatient business stakeholder who's tired of waiting. Before you know it, the process is riddled with tiny cracks no one noticed until something slips through. Let's call out the 5 traps that trip up even seasoned Power Apps builders. The first one is skipping source control entirely. You wouldn't build a web app or manage code outside of Git or another version control system, but Power Platform tricks people into thinking they're the exception. Maybe someone means to set it up later. But later rarely comes, and before you know it, every change is an override with no history. Real teams have been caught in this when a developer fixed what looked like a typo in a formula, only to realize days later that someone else had already patched the calculation with a different logic, now lost with the latest upload. The absence of source control means you can't compare, track, or roll back. It's not just risky, it guarantees you'll lose time unraveling what actually changed. Number 2 is flying blind without an environmental strategy. Far too many Power Apps run with a single environment, or sometimes 2. Dev and prod with no real buffer zone. What happens when someone tests a major update directly in production because they don't want to wait for a test deployment? I saw a transportation company use prod as both their testing and their live environment. A connector update during a mid-morning lull seemed harmless until bookings ground to a halt because the new connector wasn't ready for prime time. The support team woke up to a mess and nobody could remember which settings changed. Having even a basic dev test prod flow would have flagged the issue privately instead of in front of customers. The third pitfall is manual deployments. We've all heard, or maybe even said, it's faster if I just do it by hand right now. Problem is that habit sticks. It morphs from a one-off into the unofficial standard. Take the HR team who copied solution files from one environment to another to speed things along. A missed dependency led to a feature silently failing. Employees uploaded vacation requests, only to find out approvals weren't actually routed. That Monday morning scramble to just import the missing dependency cost hours and introduced even more risk as people tried to patch things while users were already in the system. Manual deployment always looks easy the first time. Over time, it turns predictable updates into a guessing game. Trap number 4 is thinking you'll never need a real rollback plan until suddenly you do. Teams often treat rollback like an afterthought. As long as the update worked in test, why worry? But the first time a live update causes a breaking change, nobody can find a previous version that works. One retail client learned this lesson when a workflow tweak wiped out all their current orders. Their last backup was from a solution export 3 weeks old, missing recent changes, missing context, missing everything needed to get them back on track. Waiting for a recovery felt endless, and in the meantime, support staff had to reassure angry users and enter orders by hand. Real rollback isn't a bonus feature, it's a core requirement. The last trap is poor documentation. Nobody loves writing docs, but the lack of clear notes, what changed, why, and who signed off leads to constant confusion. When issues hit, people look through emails or ping team members who have already moved on to other projects. I watched a finance team spend half a day trying to reverse engineer why an old connector wasn't pulling updated records. It turned out the data source had switched 2 weeks before, and the change was never written down, just shared in a Teams chat that quickly disappeared. With no single source of truth, the only certainty is wasted time. These traps don't always announce themselves loudly. Sometimes it's a last-minute hotfix rushed straight to production just once, or a workaround that everyone promises to replace when there's more time. The unofficial "just trust me" deployment is another red flag. Microsoft's experts remind us that the best way to avoid trouble is to document all deployment steps and automate what you can, not because it's fun, but because it shrinks your margin for error. A quick self-check. Can you name the last 3 changes in your app? Do you know when your solution was last deployed and by whom? Is there a way to restore the app to a working state without guesswork? If any answer is not sure, that's where to start looking for gaps. Even automating a single import or requiring a change log dents the risks faster than most realize. Here's the good news. Most ALM gaps aren't technical. They're process habits built up by teams who are just trying to keep pace. Changing even one sloppy deployment routine or forcing a few notes on what changed pays off almost right away. Small steps compound, and before long, the fire drills fade into the background. There's a reason all this matters. It's not just for the architects or the IT admins, it's about protecting the time and trust your entire team relies on to get real work done. What happens next and how you tighten up those habits is where business risk finally starts to shrink. If you skip DevOps in Power Apps, you're not just risking downtime or losing track of changes, it's business risk, plain and simple. Every rushed deployment leaves room for lost trust and wasted hours. ALM isn't an add-on. It lets you scale without driving your team into the ground. You don't need a big bang setup. Try one thing, schedule a deployment, lock your edits, or spin up a test environment. Over time, the stress drops, the reliability climbs, and updates go from nerve-wracking to normal.